Hey, it's Jeremy from OpticHouse.com. So I am finishing up the pencils for the Batman tattoo commission piece I was working on. And I ended up doing two different pieces because the guy who commissioned it liked two of the different concepts and he wanted me to do both of them. And he's only going to get one as the tattoo, but he liked both of them as original art pieces. So as I am looking at this video, I'm thinking a lot about process. I know that people have asked before about why I use red pencil when I do my roughs, and this is a really clear example, what we're looking at right here. Because if I were to draw the originals that are on the flip side of this piece of vellum, if I had drawn them in regular graphite, the same color that I'm using here, when I flip the piece over, I wouldn't be able to tell between my corrections and the original drawing. See, what we're looking at right here is the backside of a piece of vellum. I very lightly drew the, well, not super lightly. In fact, it was probably pretty dark in some areas. But I drew the first version of this piece, this Batman tattoo. I drew it in red pencil. Drew it on vellum, which is semi-transparent. It's a little thicker than tracing paper, but not as thick as just regular, copy paper or pencil paper. Now I flip it over and I go and I make corrections. Now what's interesting is because I knew that I was going to be doing these corrections on vellum. Oh wait, I just realized. Change in the step, change in the process. With this piece, I did my thumbnails that I'd shown in a previous video. When I was done with those thumbnails, I scanned those in to show the client. He picked which ones he liked. I made some revisions. And then I printed that out onto vellum instead of redrawing it. When I printed it out, I intentionally printed it out backwards. I printed it out backwards knowing that I was going to come in and on the flip side of the vellum, I was going to be making corrections so that the corrections would now be facing forward. This whole forward-backward thing, it's an old trick from, I know it from the old masters. At least that's what I've been told in figure drawing classes and the people I've learned it from. Artists from the era of Leonardo da Vinci, where they would look at their artwork in a mirror. Seeing the mirror reflection of your piece reveals all kinds of flaws that you didn't necessarily see when you're drawing yourself. It's just a trick of the brain. It's a lot like when writers will write a manuscript, a first draft, and then put it in a drawer for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, however long, so that hopefully when they come back and look at it, they can look at it with fresh eyes and not necessarily just see everything that was in their head. Looking at the mirror reflection of your art is a visual equivalent of that, because as opposed to having to wait a period of time and come back and look at it, you instantly see it, and it seems like it's by your hand, but not quite by your hand. This weird mirror image, looking at this mirror universe of your artwork, you're somehow immediately distanced from it, and that distance gives you a chance to see things that didn't scream out at you, didn't jump out at you before, and you're going to oh, wait, this arm is too long, this leg's facing the wrong way. And even when I'm doing something that's more of a logo, text type, graphics, and patterns, all these bats and the type, even with that, there's still a certain amount of, I may look at it and decide that one side is too heavily balanced in one way, or I may decide that the piece is too symmetrical. I need to add some more balance, add some bats that are scattered on one side as opposed to the other. This is a piece where it was an interesting challenge in that the overall shape is symmetrical, but it's very, very organic. The whole concept of the piece is organic. So I intentionally went through, I would move pieces around, add some bats to one side as opposed to the other, leaving gaps on one side, other areas feeling more dense. And I think that intentional creation of asymmetrical layout aids with the organic feel I was going for. Now, this process I go through where I do my thumbnails, then I do my pencils on the vellum on the flip side. After that, I take those pencils, scan those in. I convert that to a blue line so that it won't really show up when I do the final inks and I ink on top of that. I print those blue lines out on Bristol board, much like most comic book inkers, not most, but much like many comic book inkers do today, where they receive the pencils digitally and then they will convert them to a very light color, a very light cyan that kind of imitates non-photo blue pencil. Now, some people have told me that my process is a little bit too elaborate. When I say some people, I just mean friends when we talk shop, hanging out, and the fact that I have all these steps to go through instead of just sitting down, drawing, and getting right to it. Process is a very, very personal thing for every artist. You need to find out what works well for you. And I think that a lot of artists like to sample and experiment. And I don't think that the sampling and experimenting is simply you're just going to immediately find the first. Some people look at it wrong, or at least what I think is not the most helpful way to look at it. Some people look at it as you're trying to find your style as quickly as possible. And I think that there's something to be said for finding your own voice visually. But a lot of what experimenting with other different types of processes and workflows in terms of how you get to your finished artwork, whether it's a finished ink, an oil painting, whether you're doing artwork that's digital color on top of pencil, or an entire comic book that's just pencil, or just straight drawing your whole thing in ink. It's worthwhile to study a lot of different artists, to study how they make their work and how they do it so that you can sample for yourself. Because I can tell you how and why I do things that I do. No matter what works for me, you still need to experiment for yourself. You need to try different things out, find out what's in your voice, because what may end up being your true final voice and what works best for you may not be something you saw from one artist. You may take a little piece from one tutorial you saw in a magazine. You may take another piece from an art instructor that you have. Another piece you may take from a friend that you hang out with. Another piece may just be some comics that you read and you see an effect that you're like, oh, that's really cool, I want to do that. And you may sit down and try and find your own way to do it, and it may not even be the way that particular artist did the piece, but you'll discover something that feels like you and has the effect that you want. That kind of experimentation is, in my opinion, how an artist finds their voice. And my whole point of my workflow is to try and help overcome the obstacles I have. I tend to be bad with proportion. My anatomy gets sloppy sometimes, and it's good for me to refine a piece, almost like you're sculpting it out of marble. The first pass in those red pencils gives me sort of the basic block in and feel of what the piece is, but then I go in and with the pencils and I chisel it away and move pieces around. I figure out exactly how I want it to look visually, and then I'm ready to go in and refine it with the inks. And as I've posted in my inking videos, inking with the brush is still a new form for me. I feel like I'm gaining more facility with it every day, but even that, I still have a tremendous amount to learn. Some people think it's a really good idea to just pick one method of working, one tool, one style, and learn it and master it. I can't say that I necessarily disagree with that, in the sense that learning how to do one thing really well, specializing in that, and then once you have that, expanding outward, it can get some people where they want to go faster. But for me, I've tried that, and when I go deep in one particular process, I still feel like, there's more for me to learn, there's more for me to check out, more for me to experiment with, and I always keep tweaking. And I think it's healthy to always keep tweaking, keep exploring your own process, finding new ways to do things, and to never get stale, never get complacent, always keep growing, always keep trying to reach. That's it for now. Check out my website, optichouse.com. If you enjoy these videos, please share them. Also, sign up for my weekly newsletter to get a free digital download and see what else I'm working on. Go be creative.